It has long been discussed the impact that deportation, including mass deportation, can have on the economy of a country, especially its GDP. But new research from the Penn Wharton Budget Model takes a deeper dive into some other impacts, kind of on the fringes of that element of the economy, such as how it might also impact something like the wages of high skilled workers. Pleasure to be joined here in studio by Kent Smetters, who is faculty director of the Penn Wharton Budget Model. Kent, great to see you again. Thanks
Good
for
to
your
be
time.
back. Yeah.
Thank you. What's interesting is the topic or that connection between deportation and GDP impact is something that's talked about a lot. This paper kind of, as I said, goes around the fringes and looks at some of these other areas. Take us into why that's important.
Yeah. I mean, there's almost no debate at all that as you get rid of people, your GDP is going to go down, and that's just a pure scale effect. Countries smaller, they're going to have less production. If you ask the average person, especially native-born worker or authorized worker in the United States, though they're not so worried about GDP. It's like, what's the impact on them, their wages? And so it's really more per capita is what is more important here for this discussion. And the fact of the matter is a lot of the deported workers, first of all, if it does happen, it's going to be quite costly, much more costly than was in terms of the budget that was already allocated in the recent reconciliation bill to pull it off. But even if it did happen, a lot of these lower skill workers, they're not substitutes for native-born workers, especially higher skill, which is basically 63% of the working age population. They are more complements. They're doing things that actually enhance the wages of higher skill workers. So we're not talking about just tech workers. Just you own a business, you have workers. You own a machine shop, you have workers. You own a farm, you have workers. So we're not talking about billionaires getting rich here. We're just talking about basically what you and I would normally describe as middle class households who really do depend on the services of these workers.
So that element of how high skilled, high wage workers are impacted, take us a little deeper into that, because that's something you just kind of alluded to, not discussed about as much.
That's right. And in particular, the way there's a general consensus in economics of how we would model this is that when we think about the production in the economy, the really kind of old school way before we start thinking about what's called heterogeneous workers, different skill sets, is that everybody just kind of enters this production function with their labor. And so suppose that you're 3 times more productive than me. Well, it would say, therefore, 3 of me could replace you. We are still substitutes. You just happen to be 3 of me. A more modern way that's much more backed by data says if you're high skill and I'm low skill, then it's not that 3 of me can replace you. Rather, that if I go, your wages are going to go down simply because you are the person who owns that machine shop and you need me for production. So these lower skill workers, we're talking about 11, 12 million. Some people say it's a little bit higher than that. They really do perform this kind of critical function that is wage enhancing for kind of basically anybody at middle class and higher. Usually they're more that level is a complement, not a substitute.
But if you have a significant level of deportation for people who are mostly in that low wage category,
Yeah.
even I would think some of those low wage jobs would be potentially impacted moving farther down the road in terms of, do you have to pay now those people more
That's right.
to be able to fill those jobs?
That's right. And so there's no question. So what we do is we look at what's called a 4-year deportation policy. We don't say this explicitly, but essentially suppose that, this deportation policy ends with this administration, then things start to revert back. What happens there? Then we look at a 10-year deportation policy, where at the end of 10 years, everybody, essentially, hypothetically, all the unauthorized workers are gone. Right. And because very few people think we can do it faster than that. But And those have different impacts on lower skill workers. If you actually are doing a permanent deportation, yes, 63% of the population, the higher skilled workers, are going to be worse off. But it's actually true, some of the lower skilled workers are going to be better off because even though native born and authorized workers in the United States are not perfect substitutes, even at lower skill with the low skilled deported workers, they are much more substitutes than they are complements. So it's not maybe perfect substitutes, but they still are more substitutes than complements relative to high skill workers. So some of those could be better off, and we calculate on our permanent policy, their wages could actually go up by about 5%. Under the 4-year policy, though, they're actually harmed. And the reason why is because things eventually reverse. But meanwhile, we've lost a lot of capital in the economy and so forth. So ultimately, their situation is not better off.
And so that 10-year window, in terms of looking at it, what potentially then, with that type of a policy in place, is the potential GDP impact for an economy at that point?
Yeah, so this general agreement, the economy is just definitely going to get smaller by several percent relative to where it would otherwise be. And so then the question is, why do we care about pure scale effects versus per capita?
Right.
And one reason why you may care about scale effects is that there is a general understanding that certain things like public goods, there's economies of scale that they can be spread across a much larger population base. Also, when you think about America's presence in the world, I mean, even though some people want to pull back on that, the fact of the matter is we have a lot of presence and military might and so forth. And that then does depend much more on GDP than it does on per capita GDP. You have some countries, Switzerland and others, who are very wealthy per capita for various reasons, but they're not going to have the same sway in the world. And, we tend to sometimes minimize that sway, but in fact, it shows up in so many different ways, not just the reserve currency that everybody likes to focus on, but lots of different persuasion and an ability to kind of get stuff done and make sure markets stay open and so forth.
So the numbers are as you have seen them play out within the research. What do you think the takeaway is from doing this research and having this understanding a little bit deeper on kind of the breadth of what the impact could be?
Yeah, I mean, we're much more integrated, even inside the United States. I mean, yes, some people debate this international integration and so forth. Even putting that aside, just within this country, we derive our wages from working with other people. And, I'm a professor, I have students, that provides income. We have so many people at this university that do so much behind the scenes and so forth, way outnumbered the professors 10 to 1, and they're doing so much. And so this idea that, I'm, on my little island, it's just simply not true. And we need to kind of recognize that we're much more connected that way. And when you start to break down some of those relationships, it's going to ultimately somebody has to pay for that. It's going to ultimately be higher skill. And again, we're talking about roughly 63% of the working age population here, not the billionaires, and middle class and higher. It's pretty much us that are going to bear the brunt of that.
Kent, great to see you again. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.
And you can view the research that they have done at their website, Penn Wharton Budget Model. Just find it wherever you are on the internet. Many thanks to Kent Smetters. I'm Dean Loney. Thanks for joining us here on This Week in Business.